Hello and welcome everybody, I'm Proper Baron, and today we have dev diary number 77 for Victoria 3. This one is about military improvements, and it is a dev diary that covers stuff that is in the 1.2 open beta, which means that this isn't just forward-facing. Obviously, if you haven't played the beta, then this is completely new for you, but I and many others have already played with this, and I have already played around with the values of this, meaning I tweaked them, I took a look at them, I made some decisions, and so on. When it comes to this dev diary, I can therefore give you a very sort of thorough analysis of this because I've played with it rather than just read about it. This is a dev diary, and this is content that is incredibly important. Victoria 3 in all of its facets is definitely something that isn't primarily focused on war, but 1.0's war was just, I mean, troubled is the nicest way that I can put it. And the overall perspective there, why that is the case, I mean, obviously it's manifold, but for me personally it was always the issue of having infinite front lines and then having these bugs that make everything significantly worse. Then you come in with certain metas around, you know, how the gameplay feeling goes and so on and so forth, and it gets even worse. 1.2.2, that is the open beta that is currently out, and 1.2.3, which will be the actual full 1.2 release that will come on the 13th of March, definitely are doing a lot of good things there. Let's talk about it, and let's talk about what they aren't fixing yet. First of all, this is a dev diary written by Nick. I believe he has written the last one as well. Battle condition changes is something new that has happened in the beta. Where to start? I guess the first place would probably be battle condition rerolls. During battles, there's now a chance that battle conditions will be rerolled multiple times throughout the course of the battle. When a battle condition is rerolled, there's a 10-day waiting period before the chance for it to reroll again. After the 10 days, each tick will increase the chance of the battle condition changing by 2%. This will repeat until the battle is over. So you got these battle conditions now, and they will change, and you can see it right here as well, will change on or after April the 26th, 1836, 7 days left. So basically you get a battle condition, it's like a strategy roll, a tactics roll I should say, in for example EU4. Does CK3 do it? I believe CK2 had it, right? But basically these are the things where battle tactics come in and then they reroll. This is something you should be familiar with if you've played the other games. In Victoria 3 so far, you roll one condition and that is the condition of that battle. This is different in the beta and it definitely feels nicer. You see, for example, exhausted, you see lost, and you can say to yourself, maybe this won't stick around and I can get something better. And then when you do, definitely just feels better. The next topic here are command script changes. One of the biggest quality of life changes made was the amount of changes to what we refer to as the command scripts, a series of scripted values that decides how a war will progress. The goal of these changes is to remove as much randomness as possible when it comes to which general is picked to lead the battle, the amount of troops being allocated to said battle, and selection of the provinces when the battle is to take place. Firstly, when it comes to the selection of generals, as previously brought up in the Game Jam Part 1 dev diary, there are now more factors in consideration for selecting the general who will lead the battle when the advancement bar goes up. Generals that have specialized defensive or offensive traits now have an increased chance of being selected. This will make it less likely that a general with the expert defensive strategist trait will lead an offensive battle, while your experienced offensive planner trait general is left behind twiddling his thumbs. This is something on the defensive side, obviously, that plays a role, right? If you are defending for a tiny country, a single lost battle could mean that you lose the war. But I think most people that complain about this, rightfully mind you, come from a perspective where it's more, I need to push, I need to succeed, and then my useless vassal took the battle, brought in their stupid line infantry troops, and everything collapsed. That is something that I've seen a lot, and I think many other people have seen a lot. In the beta, I've never had that feeling. I don't know exactly how they tweaked it. I didn't take a look at these numbers behind the scenes, but I gotta tell you, this is definitely much better. You will get the generals that you expect to be defending almost always, and I think that is a very big thing right there. The troops under the command of the general are also taken into account. If one general has more modern troops as their base PM, then that general, and thus those units, will also have a higher chance of being selected for the battle. There you go. It's definitely better. There's no way around it. When it comes to the frustration that you might have had when a general gets selected, especially if you have many different generals, and if your vassals have many different generals, it's much better now, no doubt about it. The size of battles used to be determined mainly by the infrastructure of a state. After that, it would compare the average offensive and defensive values of both sides, potentially boosting the numerical advantage of the side with the inferior troops to compensate. This in itself, right, just as we look at this, sounds backwards. Just because I'm technologically inferior, or I have shortages that make my defensive and offensive values worse, I get to bring more troops. It's utter nonsense, right? These were the main determining factors for bringing more troops to a battle. We have now revamped the script to make it so that these checks feel more impactful for having more troops. They are so much better. In the current open beta, and ever since the open beta actually started, there was a bug that still persists, where if you had even a single battalion more on the front line, you would be allowed to bring twice the troops for each battle. It sucks. It's really bad. I've tweaked that number. Super easy to do. You just remove basically one line of code. It's in the open beta tweaks mod that is on the Steam Workshop. And with a tweaked value, where it's actually gradual, so let's say you have 1 battalion, maybe you will get 1 battalion more. Let's say you have 30 battalions more, maybe you'll get 10, maybe you get 15, depending of course on the overall scale of the battle. These changes, now that it's much more gradual and much more sensible, are really, really good. It takes everything into account, the infrastructure, the troop count and so on, and then the numeric advantage kicks in and you actually have an advantage, but that happens on a gradual level rather than, let's say you have 60 and 59 troops and then 60 versus 30 are fighting. Yeah, that doesn't happen anymore. This is a really, really good state now, the bug of the open beta aside. So the changes that they are describing here, really good. I'm really impressed by them for sure. These were the main determining factors, right? After the province is selected where you fight, the script will go through the following checks to determine the size of the battle. Start with the total number of battalions on the front. Subtract a random number of battalions proportional to the length of the front. Cap by a force limit determined by the battle's province's infrastructure and combat width. Increase the side with the most battalions by a random value, proportional to their relative numeric advantage. Again, the last part here is bugged, but the way it works now is that the infrastructure of where you're fighting is much more important, but so is the terrain. And this is actually really interesting, because I'm pretty sure that 1.1.2 and all previous versions didn't do this, but at the very start of the game, let's say we're fighting in Umbria, and let's say it is just hills, right? It's just hills, there's no infrastructure there, nothing is built. You will fight in hills, and you will get the combat width of hills. Let's say you build a city there. Let's say Umbria as a state is insanely urbanized, or there are many, many farms. You will now get farmlands, you will now get city, and that influences your infrastructure. That influences the general combat width and how things go. The changes made here to get a more gradual sort of increase and a superiority factor of number superiority, of numeric advantage, and the way that the actual infrastructure impacts it is really, really good. Seriously, after playing with it, it feels so much better. It feels infinitely better. I can only really say this from this angle because, again, this is something that I've actually really played with quite a bit. I've changed the value so that the bug is gone in the open beta, and I'm telling you just from practice, if you were frustrated with, for example, oh, I have 300 troops here and 20 are fighting, no longer the case. If you're frustrated because you're looking in a situation where you're either completely overwhelmed or completely underwhelmed, when it comes to the enemy troop sizes, no longer the case. It is in a much, much better state when it comes to this, without a doubt. The final big change is the province selection. For this, we have implemented additional checks and strategic objectives, which we will talk about in the following section. We've added a more reliable way of measuring the distance to either the closest strategic objective or the closest war goal, and scoring provinces higher the closer they are. There's one funny side effect to this. So, strategic objectives, I'm going to see this here in a second, is this: you say, please go for this state. You can also say, please defend this state in particular. So if the enemy takes one of your war goals, you mark your own state and your armies will focus on taking that war goal back. This is something that is really good, but I've also seen it. I believe it was New Granada and Brazil at war. New Granada was superior, and since there's nothing interesting at their actual border, so the Amazon, they basically snaked, I should say, throughout the center of the Amazon towards the coastline where the capital of Brazil was. So that is a bit ridiculous if you think about it, because they're literally it's jungle warfare, it's insane. But the general direction is much more meaningful. It's much, much easier to reach your war goal. It's much, much easier to defend it and go for it if you were to lose it. And that is definitely something that has been enhanced in the decision making. It's just sometimes you may see a snake. You may see a literal snake. Not that this impacts supply or anything, but yeah, it's kind of, sometimes it looks kind of funny, but it works much, much better. Now, for the big addition to the military system for 1.2, strategic objectives. I'm going to be honest with you, I think it is a great addition, nothing wrong with it. But at the very end of this dev diary, just a footnote, is my favorite addition to the changes, or of the changes to the military system, so please stay tuned. I hinted at it a little before, but we will go through it now. Strategic objectives are a way for the player to more control the direction in which a front advances. The player can now target a state per theater, so one state per theater, for their generals to attack towards. The strategic objective will not be removed until after the war is concluded, or if the state is conquered by another nation. This is to allow you to keep the state targeted, so if control is lost in the state, subsequent battles will target it again automatically. Like I said, it's really good, it feels much, much better. As stated in the last section, not selecting a strategic objective won't prevent a specific push in a direction. The generals will still go after the closest war goal. Yeah, look at this. So basically this is the Bruderkrieg, right, immediately declared, apparently. 1836, and they're going in here for Vienna. This is marked, they will target this without a doubt. Doesn't mean that they only target this, but they will definitely prefer this by a wide margin. I've used it in the American Civil War, I've used it basically in every war. But onwards from this, the next change that we're going to be discussing is war exhaustion changes. And I gotta be honest with you, with these I'm somewhat split. I'm hugely positive towards the numeric advantage changes once they are no longer bugged. It's really good, really solid. The war exhaustion changes, I'm not sure. Let's take a look at it. The next change is to war exhaustion. Some of these changes have been brought up in Dev Diary 75. Go and check that one out again if you want additional information. War exhaustion wasn't working in a way that we enjoyed. Taking a small amount of land, holding it until the war was over is all that was required to get enough of a tick in war exhaustion and waiting till the end. We wanted to shift this so casualties still will have a higher impact on the war itself. To this end, we increased the impact on war exhaustion for casualties and decreased the amount of exhaustion for taking a small amount of land. However, the amount of exhaustion will now scale based on the amount of land that is occupied. The more land you occupy, the more the exhaustion will scale up instead of being a percentage of a fixed value that correlates to the amount of land occupied. So they changed this, they make casualties more important. My major complaint about this is that it is very, very easy to be pushed to -10 just from this point here, so minus 2.02, because they've taken 95k casualties compared to 200k available manpower, and their side has lost 45% of the battles. So this basically balances itself. If you lose a lot of people but you win all battles, you will basically get no impact. If you lose all battles, lose a lot of people, you will get a massive impact. And I just think that in the current iteration that is in the open beta, where you can super easily get a -10, it's too much. It is just too much. It convinces the AI much too quickly that a war is lost, even though that may very well not be the case. Even though there may still be a lot of breathing room, a lot of air, and they just go and die, basically. I dialed this down. I basically halved this. I changed the impact all in all in the open beta patch, open beta tweaks mod. That's what it is. And I'm much happier with that. I hope that they sort of take away the edge of this. It's just too strong. It shortens wars to an extreme degree, which then directly nullifies the big impact your long-term economic outlook is meant to have on a war. I have seen one instance where somebody, for example, was fighting, I believe, Egypt, and they straight up were able to wait Egypt out. Because the war was that impactful on their economy, it bankrupted them, and that applies this huge penalty to the actual combat ability of Egypt's troops, which, you know, the war's over. But you will not experience this if the war's over, because Egypt very early on ate a -10 from this every single week and is already at -80 war support. The edge here needs to be taken away, in my opinion. I think this is not a bad switch to make casualties more important, and as you go and have bigger armies with trench warfare, etc., etc., all of a sudden you can last longer with these wars, but as it is, I think the edge is simply too much. It's just, when you start a war and it's over in 3 months, it's just too much. It doesn't work. MISC quality of life. It's time to move on to the quality of life changes. These are the changes to the equipment adjustment modifier for military buildings, better information regarding selection of units, and stopping reinforcements from joining during active battles. The last one is the single best change when it comes to military done in the beta. Let's start with the changes to the equipment adjustment modifier for military buildings when switching production methods. The modifier has been increased from 75% to 80%. However, there is now a second modifier for all these secondary production method groups. This modifier is only a 20% reduction in the offense and defense of your units. If you swap out both primary and secondary production modifier at the same time, it will combine to a 100%. Swapping out artillery, reconnaissance, or specialist companies will not reset the primary modifier like it did previously. The consequence is that you are much more free to switch around secondary production methods. Your primary one, no. But the secondary one during a war, absolutely. Switch it. Oh, you're getting machine guns, you're getting, let's say, flamethrowers, switch it out. You will get the benefit in a reasonable amount of time, rather than, okay, for this war I'm locked in, I'm not going to change anything, because if I do, I will eat this hefty penalty that will kill me for an entire year. No longer the case. It's much, much better. Feels way, 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 way better. You can see the difference right here with the primary adjustment modifier for primary things, and then for this one, just the secondary equipment adjustment right there. Another change we did was to the amount of information given to the player when there is an ongoing battle. Now in the battle tab, next to the start of battle number of soldiers, there is now an information icon that allows you to see how the size of the battle is being determined. Let's go through this math again, right? Total battalions on the front is 140. Low concentration of battalions across the length of front. This is definitely something that needs to be tweaked a bit, but who cares, it's not that impactful. Then, limited by terrain and infrastructure. Forest combat width 0.6. Posen infrastructure 50. If Posen, where they're fighting, was heavily urbanized, farmlands, let's say it was mining territory, you would get a specific combat width of those areas, mixing up pre-industrialization and post-industrialization fighting with, and how things progress to a much more significant degree. Numeric advantage on frontier plus 11. I wonder what the exact front looked like. Again, in the currently released 1.2.2 open beta, numeric advantage is still broken, but I'm sure because they know about it, Mikhail has talked about this quite a bit, I'm sure that they're aware that they need to change this and that they have changed this or will have changed this for the final release of 1.2. Additionally, we have included a tracker for the amount of men that have become demoralized in battle and are no longer able to participate in the battle. It's way better. The fact that we didn't have that information from the start, you can see it here, the difference, dead, wounded, demoralized. It's insane that we didn't have this, but we now have it, and that is a really good step into the right direction. You can see the symbol right here. This is the symbol that shows you how many troops participated at the start of the battle, which is a really good sort of tell, because until now, you'd look at that number and you'd go, I don't know, I have no idea. And that's just not satisfying. Now, the best change is this. Finally, the last change we have added to the battles is that battalions currently engaged in battle will never be reinforced by their barracks hiring new soldiers. New manpower generated from the new servicemen will join the battalions only after they had detached from the battle. This could frequently lead to battles lasting forever, as both sides would just keep cycling in more and more troops, effectively making the front unable to move. Right, and that is all for this dev diary. The last change is the best change, because it means if you've played Victoria 3 and if you followed my videos as well, it means that the barrack stacking meta is dead. The way it would work, if you aren't aware, is that you would place 100 levels of barracks in any of your states that can actually stem that. Then assign a general to that barrack that only uses, let's say, 40 or maybe 60 troops. This means that the 40 or 60 troops, whatever, that remain in the barracks in the garrison and are not being used by a general will be capable of replenishing the barracks' overall replenishing factor much, much faster than if this was just 60 levels of barracks that are all in use. This meant that during a battle, if you had troops that come from a barrack that has 40% of its actual troop numbers not used as they're garrisoned, those troops will recover during the battle to an insane degree. I showed it in particular in the Finland video. It's a bit older now, but if you want to check that out, I did a Finland video where we beat Russia with this technique. We placed 100 barracks. This whole thing is dead, and it's so good that it's dead, because there was just no other viable meta. This was it. This was the solution to combat, period. If you were Austria, for example, with this technique, you could defeat Prussia in 1836 despite them having skirmish and you only having line infantry if you use the 100 barrack strat. The new outcome from this is that quality has been nerfed, quantity has been buffed, and in the current beta, a bit over-buffed because the numeric advantage is just that big. Since more people will now participate in battles, if you have the numeric advantage, and again, if you use my mod, you will see it actually working rather than with a bug. Since that is the case now, you're looking at a situation where you can have quality lose against quantity, but quality still obviously has a fighting chance because it is quality. The result is a much, much better balanced experience, and I think it just generally feels much, much better with all these pieces of information about combat now surfaced. Now, where is combat? Where is warfare in 1.2? Is it fixed? Is it all good now? No. So, I think the overall experience is significantly better. Your armies will behave in a manner that requires you much, much less to micro them, to flip generals around so that, oh, don't attack, I need the other guy to attack because that's the stronger. That happens by default now. It is significantly, significantly better. Naval invasions, much, much harder to cheese now, because all of a sudden the AI will keep garrisons in their naval invadable theaters. Much, much better. But, and this is important, what wasn't solved, what was not solved at all, yes, front lines split on fewer occasions. But the fundamental issue of, for example, you land somewhere in a naval invasion with one army because that is all you can do, and all of a sudden that opens up two different front lines, is not fixed. It is not fixed. You can still get pushed out. What isn't fixed is if you play in India and you want to go to war, just don't. Okay, just do not do it. It's disgusting. It's really bad. It's really annoying. Germany, before you annex everybody, let's say you want to form a super fast Germany. If you go to war for the Bruderkrieg and all of these miners are involved, it's a hellscape. It's awful. It's terrible. The issue of needing to micro specific front assignments for your generals is not dealt with. It feels much, much better. And I highly recommend it, because the amount of times that you will actually encounter this sort of situation is low enough, unless you play in India or Germany, where I would say you can somewhat ignore this, but it has to be pointed out. This system still has this very distinct weakness. Besides this, I just really want to highlight that there's one more bug, but that might be fixed when the actual 1.2 releases, and that bug makes it so that if you do a naval invasion, and your general is still mobilizing individual troops because of, for example, conscription, it can trigger an infinite amount of naval invasion battles. That's a bug that is still there, super annoying as well, because the AI does it, not on purpose, but it's just kind of weird. In general, though, what also actually makes combat feel better now is the fact that, especially endgame tech, has been slowed down. Why does this make it feel better? It makes it feel better because there's a much, much higher chance that you have equal wars throughout your gameplay experience than it was in 1.1.2. Back in the day, trench infantry, let's say the AI gets it, you will already have much, much more, maybe even mechanized infantry, right? This is something that made it so that every combat, every battle that you basically had, or most warfare scenarios, were with you having a massive tech advantage. With things now being slower, it's much more likely that you're both gonna actually meet at trench warfare, that you're both gonna meet in a later stage or in an earlier stage. Skirmish stays around for much, much longer, because tech is slower. So in general, the improvements discussed here, and the improvements that I wanted to highlight in particular in this video, way better than 1.1.2. Are there still issues? Yes. I hope that they're going to fix it fairly soon. I don't know how they're going to deal with India and Germany. I still wish that basically generals were, instead of being a general, it would be a command where I say, hey, you have the command of dealing with India. If there are front lines there, be at all of them and use your troops as you can. As it is right now, super annoying. But the overall experience, way, 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 way better. Because you look at it and you go, I understand why this is happening, and you go, it happening this way makes sense. It's not just that I understand it, it's also that it's just sensible. It feels much, much better. This is my input. Have you played the beta? Let me know what you think about the warfare aspects of the beta, especially if you've played with my mod. And this is it for this dev diary video. I will see you later. Alligator.